Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We're going to have a great show for you today. In case you want to know, this show was really instantiated by one of our callers yesterday. He called in and he tried to make believe that he was a nice guy and that he was ready to be kind in the way that he handled us and in the way that he brought the subject up. But then he quickly went ballistic. And for those people who didn't see it, I have a 8-minute cut that I'm going to play for you of that of that interchange, and then we're going to get into the meat of the show. But before I get started, I want to remind everybody that's watching right now that I beg you to go ahead right now and share our program. That is the way we get change in this country, to make sure that progressive programs, progressive folks get a chance to get their airing. We all know that the mainstream media is not going to do it for you because they are owned and entirely under the control of the corporations that fund them, and you cannot blame them if they need to be funded. They get their funding from the drug companies, the oil companies, the mining companies, and all these other companies. So if you want unadulterated information, you have to go with the independent media. Only with the independent media can you be assured that you're going to get that information. And before I get started, also, I want to remind you again, those that are just coming in right now, please immediately share this on your page. Hello, Nancy Schlesinger, and I'll miss some of you, but I'll get to all of you as you come in. But please go ahead and share this on your wall. It is so important if we want to get our message out. Also, do remember that this is a progressive show, and progressive shows need your support. Unlike those that get monies from their corporatocracy, we have to get subscriptions from you on the coffee, on the cup of coffee level type of a progressive type membership. So we ask you to go to patreon.com, patreon.com/politics done right, and become a contributor. We need hundreds of those to make this continue to be viable. What we do is we make sure and use all of that for all the processes that we do. Again, that is our travels, that is our equipment here, that is our internet, which has to be very high speed, etc., etc., etc. So we do need the support from you to support this program, to support those who work on this program. Patreon.com/politics done right. Now, as I said before, I'll start the program with the title. The title is Today We Discuss Race and Racism, No Judgment with Nothing Held Back. And what I mean by that is that I would love folks, I don't care if you're racist or not. I don't care if you hold prejudices or not. I don't think if you're scared to say what you normally would have said or not. One of the issues that I think is the biggest problems with our discussions here in the United States, if you will, is that people are scared of speaking because they are scared of being judged. I want to tell you something. One of the reasons I think generally I'm fairly successful in working with people is that I try to lay the table out that, look, if we are going to be able to air problems, if we are going to be able to change problems, you have to be able to say no judgment. That you are culturized in a particular manner, that's how you are culturized. The issue is after you've been enlightening, are you willing to change? And I do understand that change comes in two phases. Change normally comes first from the head and then from the heart. And of course, the heart means some other part of your head where you feel it in the heart, right? And that is the reason I am very, very lenient with everybody, because I understand that as a former person who had prejudices myself. In my case, it was against it was sort of a homophobia. That was decades ago, of course. But I learned that change first came in the head, because when I was finally enlightened that, one, it's none of my business, and two, to each his own, and three, that is just how things are. That made it in the head. It took a while to make it in the heart. And I can say categorically now that I am not a recovering homophobic or anything like that. I simply am not, period. Yeah, I know they don't use that when you're talking about alcohol, etc., but I can use that for this subject, and I can tell you that categorically. So anyhow, I understand that. So I want folks, whenever they're dealing or whenever they're talking, whenever they're calling to politics done right, not to be ashamed of their own beliefs, not to feel restricted in what they're going to say, because we're not going to try to cut your head off here. We're not going to try to just throw stones at you. We're going to try to explain things, and mutually, of course, because I'm not saying either that necessarily I have all the answers or my regular listeners have all the answers. But what I think is important is for you to be able to say what you want to say in an unadulterated function, because if you don't hold back in the way you believe, then we can actually absorb that and talk. If, however, you think you have to culturalize your message, if you think you have to cater your message to Egberto Willies, because there's this big black Latino Caribbean dude that I got to watch what I say with him because you may offend me. There's nothing you can say that can offend me. Absolutely nothing you could say to offend me. I'm way beyond offense. I am a very person, very in tune to self. And as such, there's nothing you could say that will make me say, oh my God, you've hurt my feelings. Absolutely not. My goal in politics done right, both in pure politics, and in this case, we're going to talk race here, is simply to do that we have to communicate, but we must communicate frankly. We have to communicate frankly if we are really going to institute change. For those people that are just coming in, please go ahead and share this on your wall. It is so very important. Anyhow, title of the show. Today we discuss race and racism, no judgment, with nothing held back. A caller from yesterday's show is directly responsible for today's show on race that clearly we need. Folks, this is a call-in show as well. Telephone number 646-716-5812. I have a pretty long blog of the week to read that. It's a very old blog of the week that I wrote during the Trayvon Martin case. But if telephone calls come in while I am reading this blog, I will stop and we will talk live to people who have issues to discuss. Likewise, if the conversation gets long enough, I have no problem at all with extending the show today. In fact, I've scheduled a few more minutes over the time. But anyhow, yesterday near the end of the show, a racist listener called into the show. I extended the show a bit to allow him to say his piece. Unfortunately, he did not stick around. That seems to be the case when these types of callers come in. And I wish he had stayed because we were having a good conversation and I was being pleasant with him and I disagreed with him where we needed to. Their attempt to disrupt, to create chaos so that ultimately nothing is resolved. Politics done right is a place of intelligent conversation, and I was not going to let him disrupt even as I gave him latitude to say his own piece. What definitely happens on this show is the ability for others to refute as we either come to the absolute truth, sometimes via crowdsourcing. Politics done right is blessed to have a very smart cadre of listeners, and I must add, my cadre of listeners are not only liberal and progressive left-wingers. I have right-wingers that are very smart listeners as well, and I see some of them in here as we speak. We can disagree, and we can disagree strongly. Sometimes I even have to tell them that they're confused, and sometimes they think they need to tell me I'm confused, though we know who the confused ones are, right? Daniel Lido and Mike Sisek, they're both in the room, and these are good friends of mine, conservative, that diametrically opposed to many of my beliefs. But look, folks, one of the things that I've said is that I am not concerned about feelings, how anybody being able to hurt my feelings. Let me tell you, I just want to give you an example of the types of things that I've gone through following the type of politics that I do and knowing that it also has a racial component. This is what happened at my house a few years ago, and it's just to show you that this is real. All what we're talking about is real. Check this out.
Political activist in Kingwood wants answers after he says somebody shot fireworks aimed at his home. It was all caught by surveillance cameras. Egberto Willie says he was in his home on Sunday night and he heard the loud bangs outside. He checked the video, saw rockets being fired at his house. A squirrel was killed in his yard, but the house was not seriously damaged. Willies wonders if this was just a prank or if it's politically motivated. If you know anything about who did this, you're asked to call the police. And you can read more about this story in the Kingwood Observer, one of our Houston community newspaper partners, online.
Okay, so this is real. All what I'm doing here is real, and it does have implications, as you can see. So, folks, whenever we talk about trying to resolve issues, this is what we're talking about. Now, what I'm going to do is play the video, and I cut it down so that we wouldn't use an extended amount of time of what occurred yesterday. Because there are a whole lot of folks who left by then or didn't see it. It's an important video to see the discussion that we had out there. Here it comes. It has a whole lot of different kind of people in it. And because having things separate in that manner is not only inefficient, but it is scientifically stupid. And when I say scientifically stupid, is that what I want to do is I got that started at not the right time. What I want to do is get that started at the right time. So let's go ahead and get that recued again, and we'll go ahead and start it again. Thank you so kindly for being here. Who am I speaking to?
Hey, how you doing? My name's Mike. I'm from Columbus, Ohio.
Talk to me, Mike.
There's a lot of topics in politics that are being censored by everybody. Did you know that?
Yes, I did know that.
Any subjects about race that are negative, they censor. Have you ever noticed this?
Well, I don't talk a lot about race. I talk about race when it, as a subject when it matters, but I don't do what kind of subject.
But it's like race is the big elephant in the room.
Of course.
I mean, everybody's talking about race.
Well,
it's like, but nobody's allowed to talk about the largest study on diversity, okay, scientifically. It's called the Robert Putnam study. It's from Harvard. Mm-hmm. It has 32,000 people in it. And the study shows that diversity is not a strength, that diversity divides communities.
Okay.
For example, look at any major city in America. It's not diverse. Like, blacks live on one side of town, Latinos on another, and all the white people moved away. Isn't that the truth?
Okay, I love that you...
They're not really diverse.
I love that
we don't really live around each other.
Okay, let me talk about that, and I love that. Now, because I like to speak on when it comes to race, when somebody like yourself come and bring up a topic like that, I love it. Let me first say one thing. That study probably says that, but here's what I want to say in response to that, right? The difference between humans and animals is that we don't have to stay static, or we don't have to live within the construct of what was or what has been. We can actually make a change to make things better. That a study comes out and says that diversity is...
but...
Let me finish. I made you talk, sir.
But,
let me finish. I gave you I want to give you a chance to talk. That a study comes out and says that diversity is not a strength. So what if diversity is not a strength? Because we are human beings and because we are a diverse society... right? A society that has a whole lot of different kind of people in it. And because having things separate in that manner is not only inefficient, but it is scientifically stupid. And when I say scientifically stupid is that when you divide by pigmentation, which is what we've learned from white supremacy, dividing by pigmentation is sort of a stupid thing because pigmentation has so little to do with humanity that we play right into let me finish. We play right into that which these people started. Go ahead.
Yeah, the real reason that racism exists and diversity doesn't work is because it goes way more than just pigmentation.
Oh.
There's huge differences in crime levels.
Oh.
There's huge differences in test scores.
Yes.
For example, black Americans get the lowest grades in America, and you want to act like all races are exactly the same? Are you serious?
Okay, now that you said that, I love that you said that as well, my friend. You're absolutely right that if you take a look scholastically right now, that in this country, in America, black people have the lowest test scores. But let me go and tell you something that you don't know. And what happened is the ignorance of the vast majority of Americans, because they're so not exposed to the rest of the world, is the following. If I go to Jamaica, If I go to Panama,
White people don't want to be exposed to the rest of the world. We want to quit being invaded.
You know what? You can make me. You know, I love you so. Hey, brother, I love you so much. I'm gonna extend the show because I love this subject. All our listeners, the show has just changed topic to race, and this is going to be the end of the teacher show. Given that it's 3:15, it's 4 o'clock now, and I'm going to have an extended show with, what is your name again, sir? Mike. We're going to have a new show starting here. Yeah, yep. We're going to have a new show starting here with Mike before I end, because Mike brought up a subject that a lot of people are looking at that I think is so very important. Okay, Mike, here's the deal. I'd like you to make your comment about the difference in races and academics and scholastic aptitude. Why don't you go, and then I'll answer you again.
Okay, anybody who ever has the guts to Google average IQ among race groups, which you probably have never done, by the way, is well aware that there's a big difference in average intelligence among race groups, and it has nothing to do with education. As a matter of fact, most scientists, they now think that IQ is over 80% genetic. So when blacks complain about how they never get good schools, even though they live in the USA, which has the best schools in the world, especially compared to a third world country like Africa, it's ridiculous.
Okay.
You blame all black failure on other people. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you so kindly for saying that, because you're so wrong. First of all, American blacks.
Yeah, right.
American blacks, there's a history that have created this problem. When it comes to IQ, who determines what goes into an IQ test? If you're in a country where you drink from a saucer and a cup, then that person will know everything about saucers and cup. If you're from a culture that doesn't have those particular issues, an IQ test means nothing. So an IQ test is only valid when you're talking about things like math. But let's go further than that. When you look at, if you go ahead and you were to go to, if you were to talk about the people in Nigeria, or people, I'm not done. If you were to talk
now?
No, you can't. If you talk about people in Nigeria or people elsewhere where there is a monolith of black people, right? And you go ahead and do the gradation of IQs, you'll get a shocking surprise. Because if you take a look at the societal norms here in the United States, the most successful group in this country is Nigerians. Okay? The most educated folks and intelligent folks in this country are Nigerians. And the funny thing about it is you have never heard that. And you know why you have never heard that? Let me tell you why I've never heard that.
Yes, I have.
Let me finish.
Yes, I've heard that
hold on,
I've heard that before.
Michael, hold a second now. Let me tell you what happens here. There's nothing genetic about intelligence. It makes a white supremacy a thing. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel like there's something you have others don't. But here's a real issue that you need to look into, right? Instead of wasting time on it, because I can guarantee you.
No, you're talking too long.
Hold on.
You're talking forever.
Michael,
you need to let me talk.
Michael, hold on.
You're talking forever, dude.
Michael, it's my show. Michael, here's the deal. Here's the funny thing about it, Michael. I am a black man, a proud black man, and I can guarantee you one thing. We can go ahead and do any kind of test, both you and I. And I can guarantee you there's nothing in that test that you're going to be able to supersede me on. And you know what? I don't think I'm more intelligent than you are. Let me tell you what I think the differences are between you and me. The difference between me and you is I chose to be educated. You chose to be deceived. Continue. You notice what happens to people when they are no longer able to talk or able to defend their position? They leave. Folks, this is Politics Done Right. Before I go, however, I'd like to remind you that this is a show. This is a progressive show. And what we try to do is give you fact-based information. And what we try to counter are people like Michael as well. We love Michael. Michael is sick. Michael is ill. Michael needs to feel that somehow he's better than somebody else. He's not. But as long as he can hold on to that, he doesn't have to do the hard work to make himself better. For that, I don't hate him. For that, I don't dislike him. I do feel sorry for him because he's not a very intelligent person. He chose not to be a very intelligent person. He could be, but he chose not to be. Okay, I hope that you kind of see where we were coming from there. So anyhow, after he left the show and he didn't come back to the show, so I went ahead and gave that little soliloquy at the end. Now, that said, the topic that I said I really wanted to talk about today is racism. You see, a lot of people just think we're talking out of the side of our mouths. I don't know if you remember Trayvon Martin and all these other issues. I want to read. This was in 2012 when Trayvon Martin got murdered by one of these folks, one of these, what I would call these racist folks. Okay, and of course we know the guy got off. He decided to take up in his hands that somehow Trayvon Martin didn't belong there. And how many stories do we have with people who look a certain way, with folks of the other persuasion thinking they just don't belong here, and they take matters into their own hands, and then you know what happens. But anyhow, then I wrote a piece called, and by the way, folks, this is, telephone number is 646-716-5812. If you'd like to add to the discussion, you want to come in and say your piece. And remember what I said. I don't care if you're not a racist, or if you're a racist, or you don't think you're a racist, that maybe, or whatever permutations thereof you are. I would love to hear from everybody, because in here, and the good thing about it, those of you who call in, you're calling in from the comforts of your home. Nobody really knows what you look like, who you are, or whatever. But I can guarantee you, if you say something, there are thousands, if not millions, of people out there that think like you. So having us discuss some of your most inner thoughts not only helps you, the body politic, but it helps quite a few people, because I tell you what, if you are thinking it, many other people think it as well. But I wrote this piece, and you know what time it is. You know what real time it is.
It's time for the weekly blog post.
Okay, the title of this blog was I Was Trayvon Martin the Day I Came to America, and it was written in 2012. This is one of the highest highest RPM posts that we've ever done at Coffee Party USA back in 2012 when Trayvon Martin got killed. And the reason I want to read it, and I'm going to do it rather fast because it's kind of lengthy and I want to get through a bit quickly so that we can do some other talking. The reason I wrote this stuff is that the killing of Trayvon Martin and the guy getting off had an indelible effect on me. But I think I wrote this before he actually got off. But here it goes. I was Trayvon Martin the day I came to America. My first stop in America was a little town called Brenham, Texas in 1979. It is home of the Texas famous Bluebell ice cream and Blinn Junior College. My ticket to study engineering in America was based on a music scholarship, but that's another subject. I was a wet, behind-the-ear black kid that spoke with an accent in a country town. The black American kids were suspicious of me. The white American kids were curious, and the Hispanic American kids giggled when I spoke to them in Spanish. I hung out with the Peruvians, Argentinians, Guatemalan, and Venezuelan friends most of that year. We were all strangers in a new land, away from our parents, for the first time, who shared one thing in common. We could all communicate in Spanish, and when strange things happened, we could enter our cocoon. It is amazing how quickly and quietly human beings can adapt. We were walking down one of the few commercial streets in Brenham, Texas, when some guys in a pickup truck just started shouting, "Nigger!" And if I remember correctly, something about being in the wrong part of town. It was directed solely at me. While we were all Latinos walking down the street, I was the only black one. I remember going to Cadre Island for spring break. 6 of us packed like sardines in my car. I remember getting in the beach house and the coldness with which I was treated on the island compared to my geographic brothers and sisters from South and Central America. Funny thing is, they never had a clue. I always knew Blinn was a stepping stone to move up, and I moved up to the University of Texas at Austin after a year at Blinn. I had no problems getting in on my own merit, but most of my friends assumed I got in thanks to some quota they did not realize as a foreigner I did not qualify for. Both students and professors in many instances went out of their way to remind me that I was an other. I rallied the campus of for UT's divestiture from South Africa, given their overtly brutal apartheid system. I understood that fighting injustices somewhere else helped to hold up a mirror to the injustices we face locally. I remember being stopped many times by the police. It's not that I was a bad driver. Most of my stops seemed to have only to do with the desire to question me. It was never confrontational. I did as I was told. You see, where I am from, Panama, a dispute with an officer guarantees a cracked skull with no legal recourse. So the cops in Austin likely thought I was a model citizen. From a young age, I always knew when and where to engage. You know what I did? I adapted. When I graduated from UT and went to work, I encountered the same preconceived notions. But work isn't the cops. I was vocal and never took crap. Suffice it to say, I had 5 jobs in 5 years and finally formed my own company. When my company became fairly successful, I moved to Kingwood, a nice suburb with a lot of trees and very good school system for my daughter. My first memorable experience in Kingwood was walking in the trails and passing a white woman who immediately held her purse tightly and looked at me with horror. I looked at her and simply shook my head, seething. Another time, I went cycling with one of my new friends and stopped into a convenience store. When we left the store, my friend simply said, "Egberto, I get it now. I guess I was his first black friend." Inside that store, he saw how differently a person with my skin color is treated. It is 2013. That's when this proceeded. I've been living in the United States for 34 years. The fact that we still mourn our Trayvon Martins means there is a lot more work to do. Preconceived notions and irrational hatred still pollute human interactions. Sometimes their weaknesses are codified into law. Black boys and men are stereotyped. Incarceration rates and crime rates are pointed to as justification for equal treatment and fodder for false narratives. These numbers do not take into account the fact that young men in my neighborhood, a predominantly white neighborhood, do not go to jail for infractions they confess to, while young men in the other neighborhoods are arrested indiscriminately. It does not reflect that sentences on minorities are harsher, and as such, their chances of being granted parole and rehabilitation are smaller. There are many Trayvon Martins out there, many. It is sad to say that we have lost that beautiful young man. It is sad also that similar incidents occur frequently with very little news coverage. Trayvon's case seems to resonate, perhaps because he was 17, good looking, and did not have a record. Every mother, irrespective of color, could envision him as their son. Every father as well, and that touches our hearts. We sense the pain that Trayvon's real parents must feel in America, in the America we envision, an America where there is no other. Such compassion for our fellow human beings, a commonplace, and no one's sons deserve to die this way. Many are emphasizing the fact that Mr. Zimmerman looks Hispanic. I'm not sure why. Does this irrelevant detail somehow exonerate him from suspicion of a hate crime? Do they think that by presenting a narrative of minority crime, they can diminish the meaning of this event? Do they hope that the news networks will lose interest if they are reminded that typically they have ignored minority on minority crime? What is important to note is that within the Hispanic community, there are many races. The racism we know in this country is found in every country in Latin America. Many of my South and Central American friends could pass for white, just as Mr. Zimmerman can. They still struggle to assimilate. Ultimately, guess what, though? They did. Many Americans want to see the Trayvon Martin case as a potential learning experience. I do not think this is likely because we are so resistant to the only real solution, which involves everyone getting out of their comfort zone, something that I was begging for earlier. We all have to get out of our comfort zones. The trial is probative. The attempt to make dead Trayvon Martin a stereotypical, dangerous, violent black thug is in full vogue. Some attempt to assume the only reason Trayvon would have been shot is that he caused Zimmerman to do it. Many willfully attempt to make this plausible, even though Zimmerman followed Trayvon as if he was a criminal or some sort of a prey. Citizens must speak up against the non-gun control bullies that use intimidation tactics and loads of money to insist upon lawlessness when it comes to deadly weapons. If we are to resolve real racial problems, we each must take it upon ourselves to lead by example. Speak with honesty and allow others to feel free to speak with honesty about what is in their hearts and minds without holding it against them. Only when our feelings about one another are revealed can we address, adjust, correct, or corroborate them. Only when we've begun and maintained an open conversation about race and racism can we see past our preconceived notions and truly hear and see one another. Racism is not a problem with pre-assigned blame. Racism is simply a problem. It belongs to all of us. Minorities do not have a monopoly on victimhood. The white majority does not have a monopoly on responsibility or guilt or anger toward those who would have them feel guilty. The slate must be wiped clean. We must carry no grudges and begin by asking ourselves and one another, is this the way we want to go on living, divided, lacking trust, lacking civility, lacking patriotism, not only love of America, but also love of Americans, plural, all people? Some of us resist asking such questions with openness because we fear we might end up losing something we think we now possess. That is what our caller thought he was losing. Our caller believed he needed as a crutch. He had to have it. He needed to have white supremacy as his crutch. After all, things are not going well for him. After all, he's probably poor. After all, he probably doesn't have much. The only saving grace is to know, at least I'm not you. That's his only saving grace. The saving grace of a lot of poor white people who other wealthy white people are screwing over. That's all they've got left. I am not you. I am not a person of color, so I have supremacy. And that is where we are with the fight today. Instead of everybody, well, let me finish the blog first. Lacking patriotism, not only love of America, but also love of Americans. Some of us resist asking such questions with openness because we fear we might end up losing something we think we now possess. But whatever it is we have now with the status quo, is it so wonderful that we wouldn't risk it for a higher level of understanding and a more fair, inclusive, and united country? I doubt not. Folks, this is real, and what we saw, I placed the cut of the video that I put on there on Daily Kos and some other places as well, and we're getting the same kind of response that we get. Number one, why the hell are you so patient with these folks? And the reason why is I understand these folks. I know exactly where these folks are coming from. I know what the progressive intelligentsia says. The progressive intelligentsia says this is just nativism and straight out racism from a whole bunch of people who want, who think that way. That is partially true, but it's also very much deeper than that. And I think unless we go deeper than that, we solve the problems. You notice when the economy is booming, I mean, even the racists stay home. And when the economy is doing horrendously bad, it is not a true thing to just say, the racism would bloom and it's just through racial lens. Because as I have always given the example of President Obama and how he won the election, there are a whole bunch of racists who knew they were racist who voted for Obama. And I've always given that example in Pennsylvania, where the canvasser for Obama went to a neighborhood and says, hey, who are you voting for? And the white woman called to her husband. I don't know why she thought she had to do that. Called to her husband and said, honey, who are we voting for in the election? And the husband returns and he said, oh, honey, tell them we're voting for the nigger. And at that point, when that occurred and when I saw that, at that point, I knew President Obama, I knew Senator Obama would be President Obama, because at that point, his message superseded who he was or who he is or who he was. So what I'm trying to put out here as far as the subject is concerned is that race is a real issue, but we have to really temper or understand the way that it's discussed. Now, as a message to white people in general, I mean, those that have this irrational fear of black people, of black people or people of color in general, there's a nice woman that was that came on and saw the video, and she was appalled, and some of the things that she said was kind of striking. She was on our side. She understood the problems, but she also was able to say, well, a white person going into a black neighborhood, you can't be a white person going into a black not a black neighborhood, but she meant a black urban neighborhood, because they will get you. And the thing about it is, That simply isn't true. And that is a psyche that we have allowed our corporations, our TV networks to perpetrate on TV, to have that influence on your psyche, and something that must be extricated. Let me start by your afternoon news. You turn on your TV in the afternoon. Let's just use Houston as an example. Houston is a city or a metropolitan area of over 4 million people, probably more like 6 million. I don't have the exact number, so don't quote me on that. And you turn on your news network on any given day, and you know the fact is, if it bleeds, it leads. That's what they like to say. But that shouldn't be the only thing that they said. If it bleeds in color, with folks of color, it leads, is what they should say. Because what happens is, the vision that America gets of what crime looks like, the vision that America gets of what shootings look like, the visions that America get of all these issues, when compared to the hospital records, when compared to these other things, are diametrically opposed. Okay? But if you are and this is where I tell my brothers and sisters, I say, listen, this is where we give some of these folks some slack, because black, white, everybody have been misinformed by corporate America, and do not think it isn't by design. If you take a look at the evening news now, you would sure believe that most of the crime, and as much as, let's say, minorities make up about 60% of the 60% of the people in the city, and then you go ahead and get 90% of all the people that get arrested or black or blue, I mean black or brown or whatever, that tells you there's an issue there. That tells you there is a racial issue there. It is not real what you're seeing on TV. Now, when it comes to education, many folks have told me, I remember from the time I was going to school, well, you know, they lower the standards. They lower the standards to allow you to attend. Now, my daughter went to Kingwood High School. They didn't lower the standards for her to get in. They said the standard was you make the top 7% of your class, and you're automatically entered into the top university in the state. And that's what she did. But at the same token, you still, in 2018, must go through those types of scrutinies, if you will. Those are preconceived. Those are things that nobody is really trying to correct, educate, or whatever nationally. A show like Politics Done Right, what we're going to try to do throughout these types of programs is tell people, no, that isn't that reality is not what you're seeing. Another issue that the caller brought up that you just listened to, he claimed, oh, wait a minute, if you take a look at the jail or people in jail or Muslim minority or whatever, I think in the blog of the week that I read, I described that. Any BS in, BS out. If you live in a community where cops, as an example, as soon as you get into the doors of the jail, you have a record. As soon as you have a record, at that point in time, your life has changed forever, because very few companies are going to take the chance on you. So you're relegated to lower class jobs, etc., etc., etc. Please call in. Yes, please call in. Please call in, my dear friend. The number is 646-716-5812. I'd love to hear from you. And the lines are open. Let me check right now. Yeah, the lines are open. So, folks, my thing is, you then go ahead and talk about these issues. If my community people get a slap on the wrist, if they have a beer bus, I live near a park by the lake. All right, the kids come out there, and they have beer bus, and they're all under 21, and they have parties, and they go back there, and every now and then, someone of the neighbors may call the cops and say, "Hey, there's misbehavior there." And yes, please call and discuss this, Bruce. I'd love to hear your this thing here. Anyhow, they'll call these people. They'll call the cops, and the cops would come out, and the cops would say, "Okay, guys, go home." I've heard of one time where the cops simply took the keg and emptied the keg completely into the dirt. Now, in South Park, another part of Houston, something like that happens, they immediately go to jail. immediately go to jail or they get arrested, they get a record. So what happens is immediately at that point, they have an entry in the FBI statistics, BS in, BS out. So now all these white kids in my town, they never show up in the records. All these black kids or Latino kids in these other towns, they show up. Okay, come on in. I think this is going to be Bruce. Is this Bruce? Bruce?
No, it's Michael Goodman. So
Michael?
I was actually hoping you would be talking about Google today. They dropped their "Don't Be Evil" slogan. They're starting programming an autonomous weapons system. It looks like they're trying to build a Skynet, for all I know. Thousands of their employees resigned over this. They're also sponsoring the Republican CPAC. I was hoping you'd had a few things to talk about that.
Well, today I had the subject of race, but you are calling in, so I have to be frank about it. I'm glad that you made mention of it because I didn't read that. For some reason that was not in my feed, and I do have what newspaper were you looking at, Michael?
1 moment. So Digital Trends has this. Gizmodo has this.
Okay.
And Jimmy Dore talked about it.
Yeah, they're all in my feed. But I tell you what, keep that tight.
I guess you can talk about it tomorrow.
That's exactly what I was going to tell you. Keep that tight on me and drop a line in the drop a line as you normally do. We can always count on you to drop a line in the live feed. Now, is there anything? Do you have anything to mention on the subject at hand right now, Michael?
No. That's fine. I'll see you for the next show then.
Okay, my brother. Thank you very much for calling in now.
Bye.
Great. Now, Bruce, go ahead and call in. I'd love to hear what you're talking about there. That would be interesting. You always have those good scientific things to bring in. You're a smart man. I always tell people that we have the greatest callers. Bruce, a PhD. Okay, but anyhow, let me just say back to the FBI stats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You then go ahead and look on TV, and what you see on TV is that crime looks like it's mostly people of color. Not only crime, but you also see how it's handled by the cops, and you can see how we get our statistics. Okay, this has got to be Bruce now. Come on in, Bruce. You're hot, Bruce.
Thank you.
You're on. Bruce, you're on. I can hear you fumbling, but you're on. Hello. Okay, I guess Bruce is still trying to get his gear together. I'll put him on in a little bit. When you're ready, push 1 again, and we'll know that you're ready to talk. And then I'll get the blue sign that says you're ready. But anyhow, that is, those are the things that affect the vision. Now, here's one interesting thing. One of the things that the caller had to say was, and it kind of, I don't want to just say it showed some ignorance, but he called things like Africa a country, and we know Africa has a whole bunch of different countries that represent who they really are. He also said, when I tried to tell him that one of the ways for people to stop having these types of discussions, these race relation discussions, and have a more smart discussion, is pretty much the ability to go ahead and say and see what's going on in other countries, like in Nigeria. Nigeria is a black country. It's a very, very black country, meaning all institutions are run by black folk, just like here in America. Are run by, hold on 1 second, let me get to that caller. Okay, let's see. 2781, you're hot. How can I help you?
Hi, Egberto. It's Kathleen Warren. How are you?
Kathleen, how are you doing?
Good. Good show today. Thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you. Did you have a comment, or were you just listening online?
No, I had a comment.
Okay, please.
I was raised by a man who was quite racist.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a senior in high school, my English teacher had us read the book Nigger by Dick Gregory,
mm-hmm.
and it changed me. It really influenced who I was to become. And it prevented me from picking up the racism that my father taught me as a kid.
Now, Kathleen, as a white person, explain what within that book, or what is it within that book, or even within the interaction between you and the book, that kind of opened your eyes after living under a racist father.
It made me see things through a black person's eyes, and how words can have an impact and can hurt somebody else, and that was the last thing I wanted to do.
Excellent. Now, give us the name of that book again, so that folks can actually go get it.
It was called Nigger.
Oh,
and it was by Dick Gregory.
Okay, Dick. Actually, you know what? I never read the book, but I remember it now because the first time I saw. Oh wow, is that the name of the book for real? It was like, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a powerful book, and I thanked my English teacher very much for having us read it. It really opened my eyes to a whole new world. And I really appreciate the fact that she put it on our reading list.
Well, that is great. And what I tell folks is, you have to be open to do it. Is there anything else you want to say, or should I just hang up on this one now?
No, that was it.
Thank you so kindly, Kathleen, for calling in. And folks, you heard Kathleen, good friend. You have a good one, okay?
You too, Egberto. Thank you.
Thank you for calling. Okay, let's see if 832 is ready. 832, are you ready to come in yet? 832, are you ready to come in yet? 832, you're still, I still can't hear you, but I hear you fumbling with your phone. Okay, maybe not. So I want to say, give another message. It's something that I've always found ironic, right? The corporatocracy, and hear me out here, because a lot of people think I'm conspiratorial, which I am not. But institutions would have you believe that people of color, specifically black men, are to be feared, right? And I always wondered, even from the time I was a young person in the United States, and saw all of this, actually before I came to the United States and saw it on TV and elsewhere, I always wondered, why was that the case? After all, it was black folks who were brought over here, and they were the one receiving the whippings. They were the ones being killed. They were the ones being murdered. They were the ones being enslaved. They were the ones being controlled. And to date, people of color are found to be under more control than otherwise. It's where the phrases like driving while black comes in. In other words, if I drive down Beverly Hills, I may get a friendly stop. If my white friend Kathleen drives down Beverly Hills, she belongs. That is freedom, You would think that the Freedom Caucus, you would think that the Tea Party and all these other people would be fighting for us, right? For those people that are under that domain. But the most important thing I want to say is this. Why do you think most of white people around here, and some black people as well, sit back and fear black men, and in some cases black folks in general, when it is they who one would think would be the fearful ones? Because throughout their history in the United States, they were the ones being oppressed. They were the ones being bullied. They were the ones being locked up. Do you see how if you were a space cadet or a space alien coming in, and you find out that the people that are most oppressed are the ones the average person not oppressed fears? It is nonsensical. And people say, oh, well, we're talking about the violence in the hood. Not really. Now think about it. In every society, if you have an area where there are a whole lot of black people living, most of the crime, people talk about black and black crime, 93%. But you also have to think about white on white crime, 87%. Statistically, the same. And why do I say statistically the same? Because what happens is there's the ratio between blacks and whites, given the small amount of blacks in the totality of the country, means that that delta, let's say that is plus or minus 1 point in the entire space. For blacks alone, one death or one killing is multiplied by 5. So, I mean, don't let anybody fool you about there being any non-statistical significance between 93 and 85. There is. I mean, there isn't. Okay, I see one. 832, you're on now.
Hi, Egberto. I just wanted to bring up, do you see the NFL and they're combating the kneeling?
Oh, man. I am
out
so
of the
disappointed.
owners' meetings.
Yes, who am I speaking to?
I know the NFL's not Matthew.
Matthew, great. Matthew, I read about it, and actually, as I was coming to the studio, I had it on the car, and it's like, oh my God, I'd seen it in the thread, but I didn't read it, but then I heard it, and then I saw a little discussion on CNN with an NFL guy. I think it's a worst move they could have ever made, and the reason I think it's a terrible move, it's not only about freedom of speech, right? It's about they have allowed Donald Trump to change the entire reason that these NFL players were kneeling. They made it look as if it has to do with the national anthem and respect of the flag or respect of the national anthem. And it had absolutely nothing to do with that. It's entirely about saying a country that allowed a sect of its people to be murdered. And when they are murdered by police officers or otherwise, go into court and get off. Look. There are some of these incidents, people bend themselves into pretzels to find a way to say that the police didn't do what they did. Okay? Those of us who confront, first of all, when I confront police officers, I am a saint. Yes, sir. No, sir. Can I move my hand, sir? That is how I worked with the police officers. And generally that works fine. And I can say most of them are, sometimes they kind of get a kick out of how responsive I've been in that regards. But one of them was so nice to me once I had to take a picture with him, write a blog about him, and he actually got a commendation for the blog post that I wrote about him for being such a nice cop. And, they want that for PR purposes, of course. But as far as the NFL is concerned, no, they should not have fined these guys for doing that. We have the right trying to defend them, saying, well, it's a workplace and the owners have the right to determine what goes on in the workplace. What this was a cave to Donald Trump. Anything else, Michael?
To Matthew, and I agree with you. I just thought it's always bothered me how the whole argument got hijacked from its original purpose.
Exactly.
Made it something that it never meant to be in the first place. So.
Yeah, and
I thought it was relevant to today's discussion. So
yeah, Matthew, what we have to do, it is relevant to today's discussion. So thank you for bringing that up, and I probably should have a while back. But let me tell you something, Matthew. That is why these programs are important, right? Because in as much as CNN is going to cover this today because it just happened, tomorrow they won't. And the other day they won't. And as long as we continue to keep this into the blogosphere, people, it hits people's psyche. Because what happens is, even when we're talking about racism and so forth, or even gun control, if you notice, 10 people died in Texas, 50 miles from where I'm at right now. 10 people got killed by one gunman. And it's not on the news today. It's gone. It is like status. It is like normalcy. It is like normalcy. What happens to society when we get like that? What does it mean to our society when we're this way? But folks, let me run. We're kind of getting close on time. So Matthew, thank you so kindly for calling, my friend. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the live feed and talk to my great, and I mean this, great. I write about you guys at Daily Coast of the quality, the caliber of followers that we have, the caliber of listeners that we have to this show, bar none. I don't care what show it is. When you have a Michael Rudnin on your side, when you have a Bruce on your side, when you have a Perpetua on your side, when you have a Kathleen Morgan on your side, people that know what they're talking about, let me tell you something. You really get folks. So beforehand, I just want to go ahead and welcome all the folks that's been here so far in the chat room. We have Michael Rudnin, one of our regulars, Kathleen Morgan, Michael. We also have Marie Poussin. We have Of course, David Cisac, Rene Perpetua, Mike, let's see. I know I saw Bruce Pollard in there, another regular. Daniel Ledo, another regular on the conservative side. Sue Brochu, a new person. Thank you very much for coming by. We also have Matthew Tillman. Thank you so kindly for being here, Matthew. So anyhow, let me go ahead and read some of these. Daniel Ledo had a question for me. Contextually, you seem to be implying that the attack on your home was racially motivated. I think it was politically motivated, and during the politics of the 2010 season, it was a racial politics and the racial politics of President Obama. I've spoken to you before, Ledo, where you don't want to quite accept that, but that is what the case is. Let's see. Mike Cisac, why does the left constantly group people by race and sex instead of considering them individual? I wish I didn't have to talk about sex and race, but the caller yesterday, Mr. Cisac, should rest your case. The caller yesterday was unsolicited. It wasn't on subject, but that guy was going through his Facebook feed. He saw a black face with politics done right, and he wanted to put that black face in its place. That was quite evident, Mr. Cisac. And it isn't the first time. I'm going to tell you guys a quick story before I go to it. And I ride the bike. I used to ride with a group here in Kingwood. Generally speaking, I was the only black person, probably 10, 15 white guys, and we'll go camping every so often. And we went to a place, I don't remember the name of the place right now, Lake Key, Texas, okay? And we go into a restaurant, all right? And you want us to stop thinking about race. You want us to stop grouping people around, all right? So there are, let's say, 15 of us, and I am the only black person, all other white guys. We go to the only restaurant in town. It's an Italian restaurant, nice restaurant. Food is very good, all right? All of us ordered the food, and we all ordered the food individually. And I wasn't at the head of the table, in the middle. I was just one person around the table, and they brought the receipts. Right? They brought 2 receipts. They brought one with all the white people's food, and this happened about 6-7 years ago. They brought all the receipts. One came to me, and one went to the rest. Okay, I understood what was going on there. I understood it. I understood that they were trying to show me that, well, you with these guys, but you're different. That's what they were trying to show me in that little town. But let me tell you what was more upsetting to me than actually getting that ticket by myself, getting that receipt or the bill, the sole bill, while the other guys shared a bill. We were around the campfire talking. And around the campfire, everybody was, we talk and we were having fun. And I had my guitar, we played guitar, all that sort of stuff. And one person brought up race or something similar to what Cisac would have said. And I asked, did you guys notice anything that occurred in the restaurant at all? Nobody did. Nobody realized that in a restaurant where we all went together, I got the bill. And then one of them said, oh my God, I noticed that, but I kind of didn't think anything. Wow. I noticed that. It's either the invisibility of being a person of color or the aggressiveness against a person of color. And you can talk about, oh, those people are loud and those people are... Look, you can find loud people anywhere or different kind of folks anywhere, all kinds. But these are the kinds of things that an average white person go out there with you and they don't see it until they see it. Or until you point it out. You ask why we talk about these issues. I can tell you things that occur daily. We just live through it. As I said in my blog, we adapt. The things that happens, we adapt. Okay? So don't ever, Mike Cisac, as a white person, my dear brother, do get that out of your head that somehow we shouldn't be talking race anymore. That somehow that creates a problem. We have to talk race to clean it up, to clean people's minds up, my dear friend. And look, I'm glad you're here, Mike, okay? And I want you to keep coming back. And I hope some of what I say, I'm not talking about necessarily the conservative portion, things that we will never agree on, but some of the things that you can listen to me as a black man, as a Latino, as a Caribbean man and say, well, Mao, I have enough respect for Egberto to come to his show once a day or an hour and spend some time with me. And the trust is there that even though you don't live it as a white guy, that you can say, oh my God, I can actually empathize with you. Because that is what we need a hell of a lot from white folk that say they're not racist, from white folk that say they want things going in a positive direction. That is what we need from you. We need you to open your eyes. We need you to see through our eyes, as Kathleen said. Kathleen said after she read that book, Nigger, that she was finally able to look through the eyes of people of color and not just being what she would expect as a white person, because she understood then. Maybe all of you should read that book. Let's see. That's not me, just everyone. Mike, we know you, it's not you who called. I think you're a nice person. Renee Perpetua, much anger. Yes, she did have that. Certainly, we can agree there is a genetic component to intelligence. Certainly, we cannot agree that there's a genetic component to intelligence that is race-based. Okay? So let me clarify that. It's above my pay grade to believe, to know whether there's a genetic reference to intelligence based on genes. I don't know that. But I can tell you categorically that the mere fact that you have black folks that are geniuses, white folks that are geniuses, Asian folks that are geniuses, it tells you that if it's genetic, it has nothing to do with pigmentation. That is reductio ad absurdum. All right. Noja, let's see if I have anything quickly. I'm going over by about a couple minutes, folks. Let's see. Yes, component. I think assume. All right, folks, I don't want to go over much more. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll answer all of these in the forum. I answer you guys every night. I spend the time to answer. Now, when it gets to 1,000 comments now, hey, look, I can only do what I can do. But, folks, here's what I want to ask you now. And this is important. We need hundreds of subscribers to this program. And this program is going to get better. We're going to be in the field a whole lot as the election comes along. So we need your support. So for those of you who are able to, we ask you to go to patreon.com, patreon.com/politicsdoneright, patreon.com/politicsdoneright. We need your support. We need you to keep these types of programs alive, programs that are going to be frank, programs that are going to allow you to also set the tone, just like we had Michael Rudnan call in and say, Egberto, do you hear about what Google is doing? Now he's going to drop something in the feed. I'm going to read about it. Maybe it's something that we can add to the coverage of whatever it is we're going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow, of course, the news, we do it at KPFT 90.1 FM. So we'll be not only on these different networks, we'll also be on 90.1 FM in Houston, Nacogdoches, and quite a few other parts of town, of the country, that is. So anyhow, what I ask you is go ahead and become a member. Join us. Go to patreon.com, patreon.com/politicsdoneright. If you are on the page right now, you can just click on the link that is right on top or below the show. If you're listening on radio, again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright, patreon.com/politicsdoneright. I thank you so kindly for listening to the show today. I hope you got a little something out of it. I am so happy for the calls that I received. Specifically, I'm so happy to have heard from Kathleen, who recommended that book, and I'm so happy to hear from all the callers who called in. Folks, you guys make our day, my day, our day. Because, again, like I tell people all the time, I'm going to Starbucks, and what I'm going to tell them at Starbucks is I have the damn best listeners on the planet. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know what? You know what I'm going to say? We are, or whether I am out.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES, that is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.